One of my favourite weeks of the year is the Cheltenham Festival. It's a smorgasbord of high quality horse racing. That in itself produces some huge betting markets, and those huge betting markets produce some huge sports trading markets, and they tend to throw off very favourable trading characteristics. So favourable that in my entire career I've never had a losing week at Cheltenham, and some years I will win on every single race across the entire card at the Cheltenham Festival. But more importantly, what's unique about the Cheltenham Festival? Why does it trade differently to conventional day-to-day horse racing meetings? And what are the key characteristics that you're going to experience during the Cheltenham Festival? If you're interested in learning to use BetAngel, head on over to our website where you can download a free trial. If you're interested in learning how to use it, then head over to the BetAngel Academy where you can do exactly that. And if you want to talk to like-minded people, then head on over to our forum. So the amount of betting activity that you will see at the Cheltenham Festival is absolutely huge. Certainly from a betting exchange perspective, it's the biggest meeting of the year. Overall, before the start of the actual race itself, you'll see the markets match in total over 100 million. That's my expectation of what we will see this year. And you will see additional money matched in play, but it's important to note that the in-play market as a proportion of the total market is actually a bit smaller than you would see on a day-to-day meeting. But yeah, on an individual day, you will see 25 to 30 million matched, and you'll see additional money matched in secondary markets and on the in-play markets. When we look at individual races, you could see quite a mixture there, because the lower quality stuff will probably be matching in the sort of low millions. But if we get absolutely the right conditions, then you could see a race match over 10 million. But when we look at these sort of numbers, you'll have no problem getting a bet on, you'll have no problem getting on any size of trade. But what you'll often find is that the markets are clogged up a bit with large amounts of money. So it does change the way that you tend to trade these types of markets. But from a betting perspective, obviously there's going to be enormous amounts of money available for you to back or lay across the entire field. So over the years, the amount of volume that's been matched at Cheltenham has been fairly consistent, and that's pretty much what I'm expecting again this year. So one thing you may not be aware of at Cheltenham is that the book percentage is incredibly small. What does that mean, and how does it benefit you? Well, the advantage that you have is that when you're betting into a Cheltenham market, you're going to lose very little to the other side of the book. And that includes these really big, competitive, massive field handicap races where you get some really, really big prices. Now, the problem, of course, is that you are going to struggle to pick one winner out of, say, 20 horses at trading at very big odds. But you should use a feature like Dutching to cover a range of runners. That way you can basically say, I want to win £100 if any of these 6 horses go on to win the race. That allows you to capture that value, get a decent return. And at Cheltenham, because the markets are so competitive between backers and layers, you're going to lose very little in theory to the other side of the book. It's an excellent way of betting into a market at Cheltenham. Gives you a good chance of winning at a reasonable level of risk. I tend to trade Cheltenham races a little bit differently from the way that I would trade a traditional day-to-day race. And that is because there's so much money in there, and that money tends to come in over a longer period of time. So when I'm trading a day-to-day race, I tend to focus my energy and effort on the high liquidity period of the race. There's a small period in the last sort of 5 to 10 minutes when there's lots of money coming through in a structured manner, and that makes it possible for me to trade it. When we're looking at all of the money that's coming through Cheltenham, millions of pounds per race, you tend to find that it comes in over a much longer period of time. So it's perfectly possible that you may actually end up trading a race for a good half an hour. When the previous race is finished, you may start the next race. Now, typically it tends to exhibit similar characteristics in terms of as you get closer to the off, more and more money arrives. But one of the unique characteristics about Cheltenham is that money tends to sort of come into the market over a long period of time. And that makes it perfectly tradable, whereas you may not see that on a day-to-day basis. Now, we've already discussed that there's going to be a lot of money in these markets at Cheltenham, and that has an interesting effect on the way that they trade. If you have a large amount of money waiting to get matched, it takes longer for the positions to get matched through. And as a consequence, the average amount of volatility that you tend to see at Cheltenham is lower than you'll see on your average race. Prices sort of tend to get stuck in a smaller range than you would typically see on a day-to-day race. Now, the interesting thing is, over a number of years, the volatility has actually been increasing at Cheltenham. So it will feel a lot more calmer than a traditional market that you've been betting or trading in. But over the years, it gradually has been getting a little bit more volatile. In other words, the odds are moving around a little bit more. And I would expect to see that again this year. So you'll often see me posting large P&Ls during Cheltenham on individual races. And obviously over the course of the week, they can add up to much bigger numbers. But the interesting thing is that this is a byproduct of the way that Cheltenham trades. Contrary to popular opinion, I don't actually use large amounts of money in these markets for a number of reasons that we've already discussed. First off, the amount of money that's available within the markets is much higher. We're doing a turnover about 10 times what you'd typically expect on a normal race. So really, realistically, I would expect to get 10 times as much from a race at Cheltenham than I would a typical race. But also think about it, we've got much longer for that money to go through the market. I can actively trade it for that period of time. And also, because the markets behave themselves a little bit more than a low quality all-weather race in the middle of winter on a Tuesday, you tend to find that you can take more than one position. So it's perfectly possible to trade on more than one runner. So I tend to trade on more than one runner for a longer period of time. I'll open a trade, I'll close a trade. And if I'm happy with the way that the market's behaving, then I'll do another and another and another. And very often on more than one runner. So that's typically where you see those big results coming in from any of the races that you see at Cheltenham. So bigger moves can develop in Cheltenham markets where you get nice big trends, and they tend to be down to sort of two key characteristics. The first one is the weather. If the going changes, then you can expect some price activity in the underlying market. So it's worth checking and appraising yourself on horses where that could occur. But also you do have this regular theme that develops at major race meetings where you get jockey trainership gambles. So if we go back to 2017, Willie Mullins had no winners in the first 2 days, despite putting out the best part of, I think, 25 or 26 horses. Not a single winner came in. So when Ruby Walsh teamed up with him on the Thursday to win the first race with York Hill, that started a bit of interest in the remaining races where that partnership was taking place. Now, what actually happened on that day was that Ruby Walsh actually ran a 4-timer. So you can imagine at the end of each one of those races, activity and the interest in the partnership on the next race really spiked up, and there was a lot of activity in those markets, and you could ride some very, very big trends. But also, curiously, as we came towards the end of that day on Thursday, people started backing heavily on the Gold Cup the following day with Ruby Walsh and the Mullins horse. But the interesting thing was they lost the first race of the next day on the Friday, and as a consequence, the whole pattern of activity changed, and all of a sudden, the favourite in the Gold Cup started to drift, and you could have actually traded it in either direction. So bigger moves do take place at Cheltenham. You just need to be looking very carefully for them. So it's important to realise that when you're actively trading Cheltenham, you will find that the other meetings effectively get crushed under the weight of Cheltenham. That's not an exaggeration. If you fire up Guardian, you'll be able to look at Guardian and make an assessment on how much money there is at Cheltenham compared to the other race meetings, and you can sort by volume and by meeting to aid you in that particular process. But be aware that Cheltenham does dominate those particular days. As a consequence, I tend to focus purely just on Cheltenham, especially because the markets trade so differently. I prefer to get into the zone and then stay within that zone over the course of the week. Doesn't mean that you have to, and in fact you may not like trading the Cheltenham market, so you may want to go to the smaller markets, but be aware that even compared to a normal week, they will feel a lot weaker in terms of volume and liquidity. However, it doesn't mean that there won't be opportunities, and you can jump on those, and sometimes in the past I've actually sometimes earned more from those individual races than I have from Cheltenham, but not over the course of the week, because obviously my focus remains purely at Cheltenham. But be aware, if you're going to be actively trading, it's better to usually choose one particular trading style or another, which generally means that you'll be trading Cheltenham or the other meetings. It's very difficult to mix and match and get away with that because the difference between how they trade is so different. So yeah, be aware of that. Be aware that Cheltenham will crush some of the smaller meetings and that you may have to adapt your trading style to take account of that. So Cheltenham runs from Tuesday to Friday, and the momentum builds as we go through the week until we hit the crescendo of the Cheltenham Gold Cup, the feature race of the entire meeting, mid-afternoon on a Friday. But you don't have to be particularly worried about what happens early on in the week, because as you learn these markets, and it may be a shock for you the first time you've ever seen a Cheltenham market if you've never traded one before, you'll have to learn how to adapt and understand these markets as you move through this week. And for that reason, one of the things that I do after many years of experience is I actually go back and look at all of my notes from prior meetings. I look at screenshots and videos that I've recorded to reappraise exactly what it feels like, because it's very different from your day-to-day racing. So yeah, the week before Cheltenham, I go through that experience of rehearsing, understanding what I did and the notes that I made and why I made those notes. But I generally treat Tuesday as the day to build upon. I try and see if the market's behaving the way that I expect and if anything has changed, and then I'll basically take that experience forward during the week. But I don't expect to hit the high numbers on Tuesday, but I do expect to hit them on the Friday. So over the course of the week, you'll probably find, if you've never traded it before, it could be a bit of a shock on a Tuesday, but hopefully you'll be able to adapt by the Friday. But be reassured, I'm doing exactly the same thing in the background. So I hope those hints, tips and bits of advice have been useful for you. I've produced them in a sort of smaller format here for you to understand the general concept of it. But if you want more detail, then you can get it at the Academy, because I've done longer videos on Cheltenham before and we have uploaded them all to the Academy. But you can also get my trading diaries there from prior years, so you can see how I progressed through each individual day at Cheltenham in prior years. And you can also view videos of actual Cheltenham markets. So if you've never seen them before or you've forgotten what they're like, head over to the Academy and you can actually watch what the markets look like and how they traded in prior years. Anyhow, I hope all of that has been useful for you, and I hope that you have a great Cheltenham.